Hey, so I've been asked to make a little video going over lighting. I know your main project is focusing on animation, but you want to use lights and create, a little background environment for your own benefit. So if you look here in our rendering tab, we have all of our lights displayed here, or you can go to create lights and they're all here as well. I'm only going to go over a couple of these. A volume light is a little bit more intensive, so we'll focus on some other ones, but we'll start with the directional light. A lot of these lights, not to sound repetitive, but they use their name in the description. So for example, a directional light is light coming from a specific direction. There is no point in space that it's coming from, it's just always coming from a direction. So if you create a directional light, and if you look at it closely, you can see it's three arrows and they're pointing in a direction. The position of this actual light does not matter because again it's not coming from a specific point in space. So the only thing that matters with this one is your rotation. I'm going to lift it up so that you can see the arrows, but again, position doesn't matter. So let's say we wanted to get, light just coming down at an angle like this. Okay, so I'll get my scene like that. For any of these lights, you can look in your attribute editor under the directional, or whatever the name of the light is. It'll be the light shape tab. And you can see we have type here, and you can scroll through the different lights. So if you position one and you really like where it is, you can leave it there but change what actual kind of light it is. You can change the color. It's very rare to have a pure white light. They're pretty close to it, but sometimes I like to add a little bit of yellow. And then we have intensity. Intensity is the brightness. So do you want this to be just a subtle light or your main light source? With Maya, you're going to need to use generally more than one light when it comes to lighting. With your assignments that you're doing for this week, you can probably get away with just using one or two lights, but just know that Maya is a pretty smart program, but at the same time you have to fake bounce lighting and you might need to soften some shadows with an additional light. So we also have our shadows. For every light you have to have a shadow, so we can twirl down our shadows here. Depending upon which renderer you're using, if you're using Maya software, you're going to want to use depth map shadows. If you're using Mental Ray, you're going to want to use ray trace shadows. Pretty sure Mike and Tina can be rendered either way, so if you're used to Maya software or if you're not sure what Mental Ray even is, don't even worry about it, you can use Maya software. And scroll on up and we'll use depth map shadows. The main thing with the shadows is the resolution. If it's too low, you're going to see sharp edges in your shadow. It'll look kind of pixelated. So you're going to need to crank up your resolution, but you don't want to just crank it up all the way. That'll cause a longer render time. So generally, somewhere around 1,000 is a good place to start. All right, so let's take a look. Let me see if I'm in Maya Software Mental Ray. I'm in Maya Software, perfect. That's the default. If you need to check, you can just go to your render settings over here, Maya Software. And then we can just render that frame to see what it's looking like. All right, you can see we have a little bit of jaggediness going on with our shadows, so we may need to turn our resolution up a little bit more. This back wall isn't lit at all because of the direction that our light is coming from. We may want to rotate it a little bit so we can see that back wall too. So with the slight rotation, we get something like this. So directional light is a really good one to use to kind of just bring light into your entire scene. Then to briefly go over some of the other ones, I'll just change the light I have already. Ambient light I normally use for bounce lighting. It's more of a smaller light. You can get a nice highlight with it. It lights very similarly to an area light, which I'll show you in a second. So you can see we have this nice highlight down here. That's what's an ambient light is used for. And then we can change this to a point light, and the point light is what's very close to the ambient light. I think I said that wrong before, but you can tell the icons are very similar. This one is light coming from a point in space, so rotation doesn't matter with this one, it's just positioning. This one is a good one to use if you're making a light bulb. You can think about coming from a very specific point and lighting in all directions around it. So let's take a look. Okay, so you can see this one is much brighter than the ambient light, even though we didn't change the intensity. It's casting shadows around here. We can make sure our shadows, I'm going to use depth map. It's getting some crazy shadows, so we might need to turn up the intensity or add a second point light. A spotlight is kind of similar to a flashlight. Now with this light in Maya, you're not going to get the actual space between the flashlight and the ground. You're not going to get that like foggy light in the air, but you are going to get the spot on the ground. So I'm going to delete my point light out of here, and I'll grab my spotlight. Now with this one, position and rotation all matter. So we've got this one pointing down. In our attribute editor, this light has a few more options. Your cone angle is how big of a spot do you want on your ground. And you can always look at this sample on this light shape when you're making adjustments. And then penumbra and drop off have to deal with the feathering of the light. So the drop off is how much of the circle do you want to be that strong light, and then the penumbra is how much of that do you want to be feathered. And then we'll check our shadows, make sure they're depth map. I'll do a render. Okay, so you can see I'm getting that curved surface from my spotlight. All right, so I would suggest doing directional light, maybe adding some point lights, and if you feel like it, you can do a spotlight. All right, hope this helps, and I will talk to you later.